listening to IBGR. And we're back. You're listening to IBGR, the International Business Growth Radio Network. My name is William Eastman. I'm host for today's show. Now, the show is What Do You Need to Know to Play the Curve? This is show number 2 in a series. The series is about, last couple seasons, we called this Economics for Business Owners. But really, this is Neo world to me. And so in this new world that we're going to, Neo, as in the Matrix, this is the Neo world business economy. What does it look like in the world that we're in? And because we are in a kind of a different spot post-pandemic. And so last week, what we did a show on business economics and gave you an idea of how we see the world and what economic models work for you as a business owner. This week, what we're doing is we're building on that to say, okay, now let's read the cycle. The premise behind all of the shows that we're doing in this series is that you and I have absolutely no control over the economy. What we have to do is we have to play basically lightsaber here and just constantly knock down things that they send to us. And so if I can read the economy, not only do I know what I need to be doing today, I can predict what I need to do next. And if I can do that, I'm going to come out of this much better than my competition. And that's the best you can ask for. Because in some cases, you actually can take an economic downturn, which is coming, and use it to your advantage. But anyway, you need to go to the website, ibgr.network. That's IBGR, the International Business Growth Radio Network, and IBGR is our call sign. We are a radio station. We just happen to be using the Internet as a broadcast tower as opposed to a terrestrial station. Now, when you get to the website, ibgr.network, our name, our URL, our broadcast frequency, go over onto the navigation bar all the way to the right. You'll see resources, mouse over, and then underneath that you'll see show notes. Click it, and this is a show that you want, Neo World Business Economy, Show 2. All right, now, if for some reason that you're here through a podcast, real simple. You can go through 2,400 pages of show notes if you so desire. Or your second option is, right there, new choice for business search. Put in show 2, what do I need to know to play the curve? Done. All right, now, let's go down to show 2, segment 2. And here we are. And so Econ business basics for owners. We're going to talk about expansions and contractions, which we just laid the groundwork for. All right, so I'm going to stay at sea here, being a former marine scientist, or maybe not a former. I don't know if you're ever a former anything. I'm going to talk about business economy in the same way I talk about the ocean. And staying at sea, the transition between expanding and contracting waves are called troughs and crests. Okay, a trough, when you're in the trough, you're in the bottom, and here's a crest, you're at the top. And the way that we measure waves is either you measure them from crest to crest or trough to trough. We traditionally measured them in troughs. And if you're using nautical terms, the distance between troughs in time, we don't usually measure it in distance, we measure it in time. It's called periodicity. And it determines a couple of things. Number one, it determines how bad the storm is. Number two, it determines or how bad the ocean conditions are, because it could be no storm. Number two, it determines your ship handling requirements. It also tells you how much water you got under the keel, because if you are in 6-foot waves and they're 15 to 20 seconds apart, you're in shallow water, okay? Because what's happening is the wavelength is being compressed. If, and on the other hand, you're in 6-foot seas and the periodicity is, 50 seconds, then you are in very deep water, and this is just a big, long swell. And so those are different handling characteristics. But trough and crest are the two terms we're going to use. Trough being at the bottom. So if we turn this into economic terminology, you've come out of a contraction and you're about to go into an expansion. You're between the two waves. A crest, on the other hand, is you're through half of the process. All right, so at the lowest point, is the trough, and at the highest point is the crest. So when the economy is at its highest, and typically you don't know when the economy is at its highest until you do a retrospective and go, you know what, 2 months ago we peaked. That's the crest of the economy. because you typically don't know. Just like with a trough, you really never know economically. Now, if you're at sea, you'll know when, okay, it's not going to get any deeper than this. All right, so, but economically, a lot of times you don't know when the, let's say, recession or depression is over until a couple months later you go back and go, that's the date when it started turning around. All right, so now, the issue here is understanding why they happen and why do we have waves in the economy. Now, I can give you a couple of theories. The Elliott wave theory is probably the most relevant to this. And if you want to research this, especially if you're investing in stocks, you're a business owner, you're taking some of your retained earnings and you're putting it into the stock market so that you have some residual income beyond the company, cool. Then you probably understand this stuff a little bit better than I'm going to cover it. But the whole idea behind this is that business cycles typically run 8 to 12 years in duration. All depends upon factors outside the control of the country as well as what's happening politically inside the country. Okay, so economic policy by a government does matter. And typically, unless it is something radically good or radically bad, there's about an 18-month time lag between government policy and the true impact in the economy. And so that is what I've been using for years for my own analysis as well as for stocks. But we're not doing a stock show. But what will happen is that as the economy grows, and this is the basic theory on this, as the economy grows, at some point it becomes overvalued, it becomes overheated. It's hot, and we are probably coming out of that right now, where no matter what you invest in the market, the stock market goes up. Now, it's not all about the stock market, but we use the stock market in order to have as a gauge of what's going on. All right, so it's an accurate gauge. Main Street matters more to me than Wall Street, but Wall Street typically is something that's out there that you can use as a predictor. All right, so topic 2, I've got 4 bullet points I want to hit. Prices and demand have changed direction. Producer Price Index, PPI, and Consumer Price Index, CPI, have changed direction. Availability of credit has changed, and employment is a trailing indicator. All right, so here is where we're going to be going with this, because when we come in for the next one, I'm going to talk specifically about inflection points and bubbles. All right, so now how do you know where you are in an economy? It seems to be self-evident, and you know what? Quite frankly, it is. However, here are the things to take a look at on what's the trend line for example, prices and demand, right? And so the way to look at it is demand greater than supply or supply greater than demand? And that gives you a pretty good sense of something. In an expansion, until you get to the very end of the expansion, which is when you get into the bubble, is that demand exceeds supply. People want more of something than is available, which does 2 things. It brings up the price and induces other people to enter the market. If, on the other hand, you're in a situation where supply exceeds demand, then you're in a contraction, meaning that there's more of something than people want, and what that does is puts pressure on price to bring it down. As we talked about last week, understanding the interplay between supply and demand and the impact on pricing is essentially everything you need to know to be a pretty damn good economist. All right, so now, Producer Price Index is a gauge that you look at. And what this is the people who manufacture things, people who make things. This is their confidence level of what's going to happen in the economy going forward. Then you have the Consumer Price Index, which is from a consumer perspective. And the Consumer Price Index is more of a real-time metric, and the Producer Price Index is more of a leading indicator. Because if you're running in a factory and you're trying to figure out how to buy, you know inflation is going to hit because prices are going to go up because demand goes up. It's going to drive up prices. And it's just not for what you make. It's going to drive up the prices for raw materials. So if I'm a purchasing officer at a manufacturing facility, I might, in an expansion, I might buy a larger amount of something, even though I'm not going to use it because I know if I come back in 2 months, it's going to cost more or it could be scarce and I can't get any. And so I am paid to make those decisions. So Producer Price Index, PPI, is a great place to look because that gives you their forecast. Now, consumers are much more living in the real time, but this is the same type of confidence score. Is consumers are looking at what's going on out there, and of course, as a consumer, there are things you got to buy anyway, and then there are what we call discretionary items. And so when the CPI goes up, what that means is that customers are willing to go out and buy things that are not necessarily commodities or things they absolutely have to have. Okay, they're willing to take that risk because the economy is going to continue to grow. On the other hand, if they've got a sense that the economy is turning, then what's going to happen? They're going to go, whoa, 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 wait a minute. We were going to buy a new car, or we're going to update the car we got and buy a new used car. And if you haven't tried that lately, that's a real trick because it's pretty expensive. So you make a decision, go, well, you know what? I'm going to wait a while on this. So those are two. Number three is look at what's happened to credit. And the way to look at the availability of credit is really what is the interest that you're going to have to pay. In other words, we're moving into a contraction, interest rates are going to go up because the bank's going to be less willing to loan money, and they're going to charge a premium for it. On the other hand, if it's expanding, then it's not going to go up. Why? Because what they want is they want more loans out there. So the availability of credit will begin to tell me what's going on. Also, in a contraction, is that either money gets so expensive to rent, which is a way of looking at it, or it simply becomes unavailable. And then the last one is employment or unemployment, but it's a trailing indicator. It tells you it's kind of after the fact. So if you looked at this, what's a leading indicator? PPI. What's a real-time indicator? CPI. What's a trailing indicator? Unemployment. And if you just monitor those and you begin to look at how they're changing with time, what's the trend of those, you got a pretty good handle on where we are. All right, when we come back from the break, I'm going to talk about inflection points and bubbles, and that'll be your final economic piece. And from this point forward, what we're going to be doing is talking about how to do it. Oh, yeah, I said I would talk about the app, and so if you go to the bottom of the page, you can see that blue link. You can hook up. We have a mobile app that provides you everything that you need in order to utilize all our resources. I will talk about when we come back. So with that, go nowhere.